have been waiting to make this video for what feels like forever. I have been wanting to have solar panels powering my home for so long. It feels like I've done so much to make my environmental impact smaller, but solar was like the pinnacle of it, right? It's the thing I've been waiting for years. And I've shared a little bit about basically leading up to and the install. So I've talked a little bit on TikTok about how I had to apply for rebates. I talked about the installation here on YouTube and on my Instagram. And throughout all of that, obviously there were questions. And so I kept telling you, leave your questions. We're gonna do a deep dive video answering all of them all at once so that everyone can reference this video when they have questions about solar. So I'm so excited for this video to exist as a resource. So I've been keeping track of all of your questions on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and I put them in a Google Doc. We're gonna go through all of them today because, to be fair, it can be really confusing to understand how to find a good solar company. How many panels do you need? What is the financing like? I've heard there are like tax credits and stuff, but how does that work? The most common question I got is, how do you find a reputable solar brand? Now, I need to really drill this home because I have heard many horror stories about other solar companies, not the one that I worked with, but other solar companies running really sketchy business practices. What I would say, go with the most reputable brand that you can find, which is what I did, which is why I chose SunPower. During my research, SunPower continuously came up over and over again as the best brand to go with, and I'll give you all the reasons as to why. But one of the things that I did learn during my consultation is that when solar companies, these other ones that, again, I've heard horror stories about, they'll go out of business and then there's no one to service your solar panels. And oftentimes they're not selling the best quality ones and not offering the best customer service. And what's really unfortunate about other companies that do those things is that no one wants to touch it, right? They called them some kind of specific system. I'll put it on the screen. There's a word they use for them. So with that in mind, I also want you to keep in mind warranties. Warranties are a big, important thing I think to look for when you're trying to find a reputable solar brand. SunPower has a 25-year warranty, which is excellent. That is really, it speaks volumes to me when I'm looking for a warranty. 25 years is really freaking good. But to top it off, SunPower is the only solar company in the game that has outlasted their 25-year warranty. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, if you're looking for a reputable brand, SunPower is definitely one to check out. I'm gonna leave a link at the top of the description if you wanna go check them out for yourself. I also have a link with them. I believe now it's go.sunpower.com/Shelby. I'll put it on the screen and you can see if they service where you live. So reputation, warranty, very important, but the top 5 things, like just checklist, I would say to look for if you don't just go with SunPower because like they're obviously the best in the game. That's what I have found. These are the 5 things I think you need to check off your checklist. Look for how many years they've been in business and how many systems they have installed. Reviews and testimonials offer insights into overall customer experience. Make sure to do your research there. Look for certifications, licensed contractors, and photos of their work. Look up the products they offer, like the type of solar panels and the types of inverters, and make sure those brands that they're using are reputable too. And make sure you read the fine print of any solar warranty. Look for what's covered and what's not. SunPower checked all of those boxes for me, and SunPower is available in 49 states, and they have over 500,000 customers. Need I say more? Now, all of that is important to me. More importantly, I think all of that is important to the average consumer, but we all know I'm not your average consumer. I wanna know more than that. I wanna know about the sustainability of your supply chain, about avoiding human rights violations within the supply chain. So for me, the biggest reason I chose SunPower is because the panels I bought through them were cradle to cradle certified. To get that certification, a third party goes and looks at the supply chain of these panels and says that they're doing good in the supply chain for humans and for the environment. SunPower requires their suppliers to uphold a code of conduct. And I was talking about this in my live stream from a couple weeks ago. Brands have the power to implement these codes of conduct onto the supply chain, and that's how we change supply chains. So I really admire them for that. Suppliers are expected to make efforts to identify environmental impacts of their business and minimize the adverse effects on the community, environment, and natural resources. That was one of the most common questions, which I would expect from my audience. I'm so proud of you guys for thinking about that. But it is like, what about their supply chain ahead of getting those panels on your home? And then what happens to those panels once they're no longer on your home? And part of SunPower's panels, like cradle to cradle certification, is to be sure that these items are recycled at the end of their life. We'll get more into that later. But that is my answer for how to find a solar company me, consider all of those things. Check the link at the top of my description if you want to check out just SunPower. Essentially, one of the most common questions is, are solar panels worth it considering their environmental impact before and after they're on your home? And I think objectively, the answer is yes. So I already talked about the Cradle to Cradle certification for my solar panels. That is a very rigorous certification, and Cradle to Cradle considers the supply chain, which we already talked about. Let's talk about recycling. So SunPower actually maintains a national network of recyclers for their solar panels. They do first test, reuse, and resell some of the components from those solar panels. And they ship any unusable parts to the responsible recyclers. And by working with this national network, it really helps also reduce the amount of mileage and obviously thereby emissions from like shipping panels all over the country trying to recycle them. But to me, this is all a very nitty-gritty way of saying they're doing really well. All right, moving on from that question, the next question I got is, how long do they last? Like I said, SunPower offers a 25-year warranty, and it's a hard thing to just give like a hard fast number on how long solar panels last, because obviously it's going to matter what conditions you have them in, and that's going to vary literally from like my house to my neighbor's house. But I think that information gives you a pretty good idea that they're long-lasting solar panels. Another really common question is, how hard was it to set up? Again, because it seems very overwhelming. Like before going into this process, me and my anxiety brain definitely thought this was going to be a lot more complicated than it actually turned out to be. Because working with SunPower, they made it unbelievably easy. So basically all I did, right, you can go to go.sunpower.com/Shelby, the link in the top of the description, and you set up a consultation. Like I said, their tool is really cool because you can put in your address and see what solar panels look like on top of your home. That is really cool to me. But once you go through that process and get a consultation scheduled, someone from their brand will come out to your home and explain absolutely everything to you, answer every single question you have. Because that's some of the questions I got, like, how do I know how big of a system I need? How do I know what angle I need to put on my house? How do I know how to sign up for the rebates and all those sort of things? SunPower literally held my hand through that whole process. They ran models according to my energy bill, so that's how they assess how many panels and what size system you need. They ask for your energy bills, they compare that to your roof size and your roof angle and what your roof can generate for where the solar panels can go on your roof, and then they compare that and figure out the angles for you. They figure out the size system that you need for you based on your electricity bills. It was so easy. I can't tell you how helpful working with them was, again, for my anxiety brain. But the financing, obviously, like, we gotta be a little involved in this part. So there are so many options for how to purchase your solar setup, and it is going to vary quite a bit depending on your credit score if you want to do financing. So it's gonna vary from person to person. The setup I have is not gonna be the same one you're gonna qualify for. It's gonna vary. But almost no matter how you go about it, you're gonna save money in the long run when it comes to putting solar on your home and your electricity bill. And that's a benefit outside of being more sustainable. That wasn't my main driving force, but I think for a lot of people it is, so it's important to acknowledge. So the three main ways that you can pay for solar panels is outright with cash. You can do that if you want. In all seriousness, Madison and I did save for our solar setup for a long time, so we're not doing the 15-year financing, but that's your second option, which is to get a loan, just the same as you would for like a home or a car. And SunPower has a $0 down loan, so that makes it really accessible, I think. The great thing about SunPower's 15-year loan is that they have a 25-year warranty. So essentially, even after your panels are paid off, you're just generating free electricity after that. So naturally, after talking about financing, we want to know about how we can save money on that financing, right? What are the tax rebates? What are the credits? All those sort of things. So let me talk about, if you live in the US, that's really all I can speak to. If you live in Austin, I can speak to even more of what you'll be eligible for. Let's say my solar system costs around $20,000. Because it did. The first benefit I got by signing up for solar in Austin with SunPower is a $1,000 alliance rebate. So this comes from SunPower, and then on top of that $1,000 rebate, they're also going to give you back 3 months of your electricity bill. So immediately we take that off of that $20,000 number, okay? The next benefit I got in the mail back from getting my solar setup all done was a $2,500 check in the mail from Austin Energy, which was another rebate for putting solar on my home. And the biggest help with my solar setup is a 30% tax credit from the federal government. I'll leave a link in the description so that you can check the incentives specifically where you live, because your city or your state might be giving out even better credits than mine is. I almost believe that most likely they are, because I live in Texas. The 30% tax credit will come during tax season, which as a self-employed person will be just beautiful. Beautiful surprise that time of year. Keeping on the theme of money is how long does it take for this investment to pay off? Again, that's going to vary a lot depending on your size system, depending on where you live, depending on how much energy you're generating, all that sort of stuff. But on average, the math says around 9 years. But one of the things I really enjoyed when Shelby, my consultant, came to my house, she explained to me the importance of looking at it with a little bit of a different lens, specifically from the viewpoint of inflation, because over the last, obviously, few years, we've really experienced how much inflation can impact us. And what I really like that she explained is that once I'm generating my own electricity, I don't have to worry about the market rate of electricity and how much it's going to cost me to power my home, because I'll be able to generate the majority of it myself. So the estimate is around 9 years. It's definitely going to vary system to system, but it was really reassuring to kind of put in my mind at ease that in my future, when I'm probably not earning as much money in my retirement as I am in my working class years, I'll be a little bit more at peace. Not to mention that most studies show that adding solar to your home ups the value of it, so keep that in mind when we're talking about future and investments and all that kind of stuff. All right, I think those are most of the general questions. And now we'll talk about my system more specifically, which I think will give you a little bit more context to at least these questions that were being asked. I'm so sorry about the lighting today, you guys. It's going in and out, in and out, in and out. I can't do anything about it. Now we look good again. All right, what size is my system? Y'all, I didn't know. I had to ask SunPower. I don't know. I don't know anything about calculating solar needs. They say it is 5.10 kW. Kilowatt. And my panels are SunPower M Series 425 watt panels. They were massive, by the way. And obviously, you know, like after you get something, you start seeing it everywhere. It's like when you get a car, you start seeing it everywhere. Same thing with solar panels. Now that I got solar panels on my roof, I'm checking out everybody's solar systems everywhere. And it seems like the panels I got are like double the size of a lot of people's panels. And they're supposed to be like super efficient, super high generating. And so the calculations that SunPower did calculate that those panels should cover 96% of my yearly energy consumption. And I will say it was very flattering for me when Shelby looked at my electricity bill and told me that my electricity use was very, very low, and she was very, very impressed. Okay, here's another question I got that actually I want to talk about a lot, and it is, do I have a battery system with my solar setup? And the answer is no. And I definitely considered it a little bit, but there are a few reasons why I chose not to, and I think we should talk about it, because I think a lot of people, me included, like a few years ago, would have thought, what's the point of having solar panels if you don't just have batteries and like use your own energy? If you're getting a solar setup, make sure you ask the company that if someday you want to get a battery, that it is possible and easy to add one on. Because right now the technology is not exactly where solar panels are, and the cost for that technology is still really high. So I am not off grid, and that means that when the electricity goes out, fingers crossed not this summer because I may die, but if we had another situation like the winter storm, I am going to be off grid just like everybody else. And I realize that. But to be honest, that time that it happened during the winter storm was, yes, very, I don't want to use the word traumatizing lightly, but it was a terrifying situation, and it has not happened since. Now, I did make sure to ask SunPower and Freedom Solar, if I do choose to add a battery in the future, is that possible? Is it easy? And they said absolutely. If I want to make my solar system on my roof bigger, if I want more panels, easy peasy. If I want to add a battery, they said easy peasy. So I felt really good about that, knowing that I can wait for maybe the tech to get to where it makes sense for me to add it, and then I can do that then. The other thing is, and again, like my perspective a few years ago before going through this process was that like, well, then you're kind of just offsetting your electricity using solar panels. And the answer is yes, that is exactly what I'm doing, because our grid in Texas cannot support our energy needs. And by producing additional energy that is renewable, I am helping the grid, and that is really important for energy production, for transitioning our really dirty forms of fuel that we do have to fire up when the grid has more demand. Instead of doing that, I now have renewable energy going to the grid. It just makes sense. I think just after evaluating all of those things, it made sense for me to just do the solar. And in the future, if I want and I feel it's necessary and helpful to add a battery, then we can. So basically, since I'm not off grid, the goal is net zero. The amount of energy I bring in from the grid is less than or equal to the amount I am putting into the grid. So the way that works, I'm gonna read what I wrote down so that I don't tell you wrong. My energy provider has an incentive program that works on a value of solar rate. So this means my utility credits me an amount of 9.91 cents per kilowatt hour for the excess solar energy I produce that goes back onto the grid. That amount deducts from my cost of my utility bill, and I either pay the difference or I overproduce. I earn a credit that carries over month to month. So essentially, when they set up my system according to my electricity bills and they said that my system would meet 96% of my energy needs, that's over the course of the year. Because here in Texas, we use most of our energy in the summer because it's so fucking hot. We could just sit here and burn and melt and die. So that means that I am using up all of the energy that I am producing, most likely, and anything I end up sending back to the grid, they're creating a credit on my account at night. Like when I'm not producing, I'm using the energy that I sold back to the grid, if that makes any sense. But then come spring and fall and winter, when we use our ACs a lot less, but we still live in sunny Texas, so we're still producing a ton of energy, I will be selling my energy to the grid. That money will go onto my utilities account. So then in the months where I'm not using as much energy, I just don't have an electricity bill at all. I hope that made sense. My favorite thing about using SunPower has been their app. It's incredible. It shows me exactly, like, minute to minute how much energy I'm producing and how much energy I am using and how much energy I'm putting back to the grid or bringing in from the grid. It's made me a lot more aware of how much energy we use. Like, I'll go around my house turning things on and off and watching how the number moves on my phone. It's so much fun. Now, another question we got is, what does SunPower recommend as far as maintenance goes? And I think, again, this is going to depend on where you live, how the weather is where you live, what the setup is, all those sort of things. From what I can see and what I have asked SunPower, they're relatively maintenance free. Since most of the panels are installed on a tilt, you don't have to worry about like things sitting on them, like leaves and such, rain, all that kind of thing. The only exception to this is like if a lot of dust or soil is accumulating on your panels, and then you might have to have someone come out and clean them like once a year or something. And speaking of the app, a great way to know if your panels are producing at the rate they're supposed to is the app. It'll show you panel by panel production. So if you see that one of your solar panels is producing like really low, you can reach out to SunPower and they'll come and check it out. Again, the app is amazing. Now, I live in Texas, so my experience with solar is obviously based on a very sunny, hot climate. Like I was saying, in the winter, it will be colder, but we'll still have sunny days. So we won't be using AC, but we'll still be generating electricity, and that will definitely vary depending on where you live. Even if it's snowing, as long as your panels don't get like pounded in snow and are covered by the snow, you can still be generating electricity. But I'm so excited about my system. I hope I answered all of your questions. I think I answered every question that I can. If you have any additional questions, I would definitely encourage you to reach out to SunPower if you have questions about like your specific system and all those sort of things. But I am so excited for this video to exist now, to be used as a resource for people who are interested in getting solar panels on their home and going solar and helping the grid and helping the planet and saving money, my friends. Okay, I'm very excited. Huge shout out to SunPower for sponsoring this video. I'm gonna leave my link at the top of the description, like I said. From now on, I'll leave my link anywhere that I can so that you guys can have access to SunPower, because for the rest of my life, when people ask me what solar panels I recommend, it's gonna be SunPower. So my specific link, if you wanna let them know that I did refer you, is go.sunpower.com/Shelby. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, until next time, you cannot do all the good that the world needs, but the world needs all the good that you can do. Bye, guys.